How are you all doing tonight? My name is Big Bob Boy, and welcome to a Hunter's Essential Guide, Melee Edition. Oh yes, the Melee Hunter. Some scoff, but there's a long and storied tradition of the Melee Hunter. Don't forget the first hunter, Gehrman, was melee focused with ranged on the side. Lady Maria, Father Gascoigne, Hunter S. Thompson. There's a long line of melee focused hunters, and there is no shame in being one, at least in SoD. So in this video we're going to cover talents, rune choices, rotation, and then the much sweatier rotation, stat priority, pets. We don't really need to cover consumes as they are basically the same as BM. Then we'll talk about melee hunters' place in the meta, and finally we'll talk about the future of the melee hunter. The talents first. Unlike virtually every other hunter spec, there are some variations here. So the first spec, which is what I recommend for most situations, is full-on BM. Yeah, so you just use the BM spec like this. But there is an option for survival. 3 in monster slaying, 3 in humanoid slaying, and 2 in savage strikes. All 3 of these are very good talents. After those 8 points though, our options are super limited. There's not a lot you can use to increase your melee DPS. For a PvP spec, I don't mind going deeper into serve. It is really fun to have deterrence at this level. You could dip into BM, but you can only really get improved revived pets, so that's not great either. If you go into marksman, you can get 3% crit. Okay, not great. I generally will go deeper survival, putting some points into deflection and praying for that parry haste. Then grab deterrence, that leaves you with 2 extra points. Doesn't really matter where you put them. I'd probably put them in traps if I'm PvPing a lot, and 1 point in sure-footed. But those last few points are mostly up to personal preference. The runes. Thankfully, the rune choices for melee are simple as shit. Wait, are they? Chest first. Heart of the Lion. You know what this is. If we were the only one doing kings in a group, this is a great buff. Just use it. What do we use outside of that? It's a bit fucked, actually. Cobra Strikes. For some reason, only works at ranged, and I have no fucking clue why. So we are not going to use this as a melee hunter, even though it would actually be pretty good. What about Master Marksman? It's actually not bad. It's flat 5% crit. Wait, what the fuck? Why is Cobra Strikes only ranged, but Master Marksman also gives melee crit? Classic Blizzard. Or if you're not running BM talents and are going full survival, you can actually run Lone Wolf. It is not optimal DPS wise at all, but its damage actually isn't in the dumpster. There aren't any real fights in BFD where you would need to run this, but maybe there will be some in the future where this is applicable. Or, you know, if you run out of pet food and you don't want your pet to run away, or some kind of challenge run. Yeah. What if we did that? Melee hunter, no pet, Iron Man mode. Leg rune. This one is super easy. We always want flanking strike. Flanking strike is not bad now that its damage was fixed, and it's really what facilitates melee hunter. Glove rune. Man, Carve is so good. Wow. We are lucky to have it. Probably the best rune in all of SoD. Yeah, obviously I'm kidding. Carve is fucking garbage. We need to use the BM rune. There's literally no other option here. If you're just out leveling, you can use Chimera or Explosive while you're running into the mob to melee or to 2-target melee weave, but there's no real point. Just use the BM rune. And this is why going full BM talents is also a good idea. If we had a better glove rune, going serve talents would make more sense. Of course, Liz had to nerf this rune, right? They just fucking had to. Let me read this for you. We remain concerned that hunter pets are still too powerful and believe that the best way forward is to rein in the Beast Mastery rune while compensating via the hunter's main spells. What the fuck are you on about? You didn't buff anything. Except reduced some mana costs, I guess? Chimera Shot, still lower than it was originally, still not that great. Explosive Shot, still this weird ass AoE rune. And for BM, literally nothing. Literally nothing but nerfs. Compensating via the hunter's main spells. I try not to attribute malice when it could be explained by stupidity. In this case, yes, it was stupidity. Basically, every change Hunter has seen in SoD has been based in stupidity. Even after the nerfs, this doesn't really change any of our build choices since we didn't have that many build choices in the first place. Anyway, the basic rotation. Melee Hunter rotation is fairly simple. So if you have tons of time before the fight starts, go ahead and use Hunter's Mark, otherwise you can't skip it. As you are running into the fight, you want to get your pet in, and you want to auto shot, multi-shot, then put up Serpent Sting. At that point, you're going to run right into melee, and we want to use our flanking macro to start. It's the same macro as the one for BM Weaving. This one works best for me, so I would recommend it. But as a full-on melee build, we only need to use the macro for our opener, really. After that, we're just down to Raptor Strikes. If Raptor procs flanking, you can use flanking immediately. You can just keep using the macro if you want, but it's also fine to do them separately. And that's it. Keep your pet on target and keep hitting Raptor Strike to proc flanking. It's pretty simple. Here's how that rotation looks. It's kinda low APM, but I generally like it. Now, what if we want to get sweaty? The sweaty rotation. Melee Hunter has two ways to stimulate your sweat glands. The first is reverse weaving. Some call it range weaving. That's dumb, don't call it that. I call it reverse weaving, but if you have a better name, by all means, let me know in the comments. This rotation takes your basic melee rotation and adds in auto and multi-shot, similar to how we start the basic rotation. We want to do this without delaying Raptor Strikes. So after a Raptor goes off, we move out of range for an auto shot and a multi-shot. If Serpent Sting is down, this is a decent time to reapply as you're moving back into melee. Raptor is not on the GCD, so you won't delay that. This is a very noticeable DPS increase. If you're trying to parse as melee, it's kind of necessary. Although if parsing is your goal, I'm not sure how this will show up on WoW logs because they keep kind of changing how they count melee hunter. I think if you're doing too many multi-shots now, they will not count you as melee, even if you're still doing a ton of auto attacks. Just keep that in mind if parsing is your goal. And here's how that rotation looks. Could you also go out to range for auto shots even if multi is down? Sort of. You could do that. At that point, we're basically doing max weaving because we're hitting every Raptor Strike, we're hitting normal melee auto attacks, and we're hitting auto shots. I don't really think it's worth it. Our ranged attack speed is kind of fast right now. Once we see some slower weapons, it would likely be worth it. But if you want to do it now, it's not like it's going to tank your DPS, and it is good practice for later. The other sweaty thing you can do for melee DPS is Wing Clip and Wind Fury Fishing. Yes, Wind Fury Fishing. If you don't know what that is, basically, if Wind Fury is not on cooldown, you want to spam instant attacks as much as you can in order to proc a Wind Fury. In our case as Hunter, that means Wing Clip. So we spam the shit out of Wing Clip. If you have Wind Fury, this is totally worth it. It can add a significant amount of DPS. There's just one issue here. Wing Clip is actually a lot of mana at level 25. We only have rank 1 and it's 40 mana. Arcane Shot rank 3 is 38 mana. Flanking Strike is now 9 mana. Multi-shot is 75. You're going to have to very closely manage your mana doing this, and you're probably only going to have the opportunity to do this on shorter fights. How do you check the cooldown on Wind Fury? Well, you can just count it after you see it goes off, or this weak aura should work. I haven't used it extensively, but it worked the one time I did try it. Should you still Wing Clip even if you don't have Wind Fury? Actually, yes. So this is weird, but if you're not going to run and you're not about to jump out to do your auto shots and multi-shots, you will have free globals while you're in melee, especially since Raptor is not on the global cooldown. Wing Clip only does 5 damage, but 5 damage is 5 damage. It is extremely mana inefficient though, so only use that when mana is not an issue. Alright, let's talk about the stat prio. Stat prio is slightly different for melee hunter. Agility, attack power, strength, int, stam, spirit. Agi is and will always be our best stat. We get ranged attack power, melee attack power, crit, dodge, and even armor. It's always best. Attack power is always better than strength as it improves ranged attack power and melee attack power. However, there are some items that are only melee attack power or only ranged attack power. Just watch out for that. Strength gives Hunter 1 melee attack power per point. Some people seem to think it's 2 like Warriors and Paladins for some reason. It is not. It is a useful stat for a melee hunter, but we're not specifically trying to stack strength even as a melee focused hunter. We want that agility. Int is still useful to increase the size of our mana pool, but not that important. Hit and crit secondary stats are obviously great, but there's no real opportunity to stack those with gear at level 25, and most likely that will be the same at level 40. They'll become much more important in the level 50 and 60 brackets. Pets. Melee hunter pets are pretty simple. We are always going to be using flanking strike and almost always going to be using the BM rune, so a high DPS, low speed pet is what we need. Man, I wonder what kind of pet fits that. Could it be, yeah, you guessed it, a 2.0 speed cat? That is ideal. Raptors are also fine for now, but replaced in the level 40 bracket. In the next bracket, we will be seeing the BM talent Frenzy. However, even with that, I would still stick with a 2.0 speed. Frenzy uptime should still be near 100%, and you just lose out on flanking damage going to a faster pet. Although I would like to test that to be 100% certain. Wind Serpents are fine for PvP, actually they're very good. But for Melee Hunter, I would not Wind Serpent for PvE. You're going to be doing a lot of melee, you don't want your pet at ranged, and you especially don't want him pulling mobs away from you. Are there any pets other than cat really worth using? At the moment, actually there really isn't. There's always a use for wolves at 60, but right now they're just inferior to cats. Maybe at 40, and it's a similar situation for bats and owls. They do have situationally useful abilities, but it's just not something we're really going to run into at these levels. So get your cat just like vanilla and enjoy it, because Blizz doesn't want you to do anything new in SoD. Melee hunters' place in the meta. Yeah, where do melee hunters fit in the meta? They're not terrible, and they do have a place in the meta. It is behind melee weaving BM, but that makes sense, even after the recent nerfs. It is still an absolutely solid DPS, especially if you're willing to put in a little bit of work and do some of the sweatier rotation. You have a fantastic group buff with Lion. You bring an incredible amount of utility by having a pet that can tank, although I haven't tested pets raid tanking since the nerfs. The only real downside is Hunter ends up being the only melee with no interrupt, and there are occasions where having an interrupt is pretty damn useful. Melee Hunter is definitely not a meme in SoD. If you want to do it, it is totally fine, and quite fun at that. The future of Melee Hunter, this is much murkier than it was for BM or Marksman. There's a lot of things that can happen with Melee Hunter. Let's talk about the knowns first. Our talents don't go anywhere. Melee Hunter remains virtually unchanged by talents to level 40. If you're staying full on BM spec, well, your pet gets insane buffs, and that's nice, but for the Hunter, even if you go survival, there's like no changes through talents, with the small exception of counterattack. This is an extremely cool ability, but its damage isn't that impressive, and it's pretty limited in use in PvE, since your pet will be tanking most of the time anyway. Not bad for PvP though, so yeah, that's not much. Now, maybe I slammed a bunch of hopium in the back of my Dragula and forgot about it, but I do think Melee Hunter is going to see some improvements in Phase 2, either through updates to our current runes or new runes. We know there was the better Raptor Strike and in combat trans both data mined before release. If we got just that Raptor Strike, that would instantly change Melee Hunter into a top tier spec. And also, melee only, you'd be very unlikely to need to ever reverse weave. I don't know if we will get that Raptor Strike. They could make it a new rune, or if they want to be smart, they should tie it to the Carve rune. There's a lot of options, but I would not be surprised at all to see something change for either Raptor Strike or Mongoose Bite, but only for melee hunters. Another thing is, we do know that very late up until release, they were making changes to Wyvern Sting, and those did not make it to live. The fact that they were making changes to it so late in development makes me think there's a good chance we'll see something with Wyvern Sting, which makes a lot of sense. If we're level 40 and we're getting new runes that in some way interact with our 31 point talent would be pretty logical, although Blizz is usually not very logical. And the last thing, alright, snorted a bunch of cocaine for this. Why not Tank Hunter? Yeah, why the fuck not? I don't mind being the only class remaining that can only DPS, and I would prefer if Blizzard just fixes our DPS specs. But there's already a decent amount of talents in the survival tree that increase survivability. Why not put in a few more runes so we can tank as well? Tanking with a pet is not that strange. Death Knights have been doing it for years and now Locks too. The fact that Hunter runes are probably the shittiest runes in all of SoD kind of leads me to believe Blizz originally had other plans for Hunter. Tank may have been one of them. I could see Blizz taking the lazy route and just adding a couple of tank runes instead of more DPS focused runes. I don't really care if Hunter gets a tank kit. It's not needed, although I would definitely try it out. But I would not be at all surprised if this is what happens in the next phase. And if you like Melee Hunter, because I mean, who doesn't? Stick around because I am leveling a hunter on stream full on Melee. It's been amazing. I hope you liked this video because I am going hard over here. We are close to 20k subs, so if you did enjoy it, hit that like button, subscribe button, give me that Raptor Strike, and I can die happy button, all that other shit. I appreciate each and every one I get. And we even have a membership option. Click that join button and check it out if you want to support the channel. YouTube has recently changed the way memberships work, and now all my members get to watch videos early. Every single one of them. But that is going to be all for this one. I really appreciate you all watching, and I will see you all for the next one.